Hey everyone, it's LS, and this is the patch 10.12 notes rundown. Don't really know what to expect. The last patch was definitely Resident Sleeper. We're going to see how this one actually is, and if there's going to be any updates to anything that's really going on inside of solo queue. I know that last time with the Resident Sleeper patch, I was pretty adamant that not too many changes were actually going to occur, but I think that there's some changes in this that are potentially meaningful. So we take a look at the buffed, we see Akali, Brand, Senna, Viktor, Volibear, and Xayah. Some of these champions definitely can be meta warping, and then when we looked at the nerfed, we see Cassiopeia, Fiddlesticks, Trundle, Varus, and Yasuo. Varus is obviously on my radar for something that I'm really curious to see what they end up doing. The skins we'll obviously get to at the end. This looks like something out of a Marvel movie, and this also looks like, I don't even know what exactly is going on there, but totally fine. Champions, Akali. Q damage increased. Q 5-point strike damage 25 to 125. Scaling 0.6 total AD plus 0.6 ability power to 30 to 130 plus 0.65 plus 0.65 ability power. So a little bit of damage here added to her Q. I don't know if this changes up her ability to push the back line. Maybe that's what they're going for here, and if that helps her wave clear, then that obviously helps her as a champion. Kali should still only ever come in as a counter pick, and really only if the stars align, so I really don't think that this is that big of a change whatsoever. It's mostly just placebo. Unless it pushes the backline, in which case I guess you can argue that it's not placebo, but generally, I mean, it still is in the sense that it's not going to change when and why she's picked. Bran, increased mana restore on blazed enemy takedowns. Passive Blaze. A Blaze kill mana restore 6 to 18. Levels 1 to 18 to 20 to 41 to 18. So one of the things here that I think this ends up doing is they're saying that it's actually mid-favored, but I think that if you're going to take Brand anywhere with this kind of a buff, I think it's going to end up inside of the jungle. This is obviously really big for his mana restore and his sustain inside of the jungle against jungle camps, so he gets a lot of mana back. That's actually my first thought. I'm not thinking about it in mid lane, because I think that if you're taking Brand mid, you're trolling. There's no real reason to take him mid, I think, over support or jungle, just due to the nature of how the champ tends to conduct himself. He doesn't really need a lot of resources. He just needs base levels, and he needs very specific items, and once he gets them, he's very effective, just because his kit is so strong. And generally, champions like that tend to stay away from mid unless they're really, really influential and powerful, which I guess is sort of synonymous. But anyways, Cassiopeia, base health and armor decreased, magic resistance increased. So this is interesting because it's slated as a nerf, but when we actually look at this, she's losing 15 HP, and she's losing 2 armor, but her magic resist is actually going up by 4. So I think this actually is buffed to most of the matchups that Cassiopeia is going to end up taking, although she is really good against heavy engage, like physical damage team compositions that have a reliance on sticking. So in that regard, I guess it is a slight nerf if those champions aren't dealing any magic damage whatsoever. But this is interesting that they don't have a word which is like an adjustment or something. Or actually, I think that they do whenever they post on Twitter, right? They have a word that they have the word adjustments that they use, I think. But here it's slated as a nerf, which I find really bizarre, because it's obviously a buff in some instances and a nerf in other. So Cassiopeia is still going to be fine. This isn't going to change her whatsoever. Fiddlesticks, W, minion damage reduction increase. W, bountiful harvest. Minion damage reduction 40% to 50%. So this is really interesting. It seems like when I watch Fiddlesticks, I know that the consensus in Korea and from some Korean pro players that I've talked to is that Fiddlesticks is really, really bad, and he's very weak, and he's gimmicky, and he's only good if you get really good at him, and opponents still don't have a level of comfort against playing against him, which is obviously something that sometimes goes under-talked about, or it's not mentioned a lot, that sometimes champions can appear to be good because they're okay, or they're passable enough, and they're obscure enough as a champion that if you get really good at them and the opponents aren't prepared for them, then they can end up overperforming until the opponents get adjusted. And it seems like in North America, Fiddlesticks is having a lot of success on the latter, but I know that a lot of players in Korea think very low of Fiddlesticks. I know that Fiddlesticks was apparently picked in competitive in one of the Southeast Asian games, and it didn't have the best of performance in that game in competitive. Obviously, LCS, LEC are resuming in 2 days, so we'll see if Fiddlesticks ends up making the cut. I don't understand the nerf whatsoever, because I'm of the school of thought that Fiddlesticks is is needing actual buffs, or, well, he needs a shift in power if he's going to be somehow competitively viable. Senna, bug fix on attack windup, passive Mr. Wraith drop chance increased, passive absolution. Mr. Wraith drop chance 1.67% on minions Senna kills to 8.33% on minions Senna kills. This is obviously always really scary, especially because this is also still a buff to fasting Senna. In the sense that eventually Senna comes online and then she starts getting scarier, so this is just really weird. Riot obviously pushing Senna I think is completely fine though. I think that she's a very exciting champion for the game. I think that she's one of the best kits that League of Legends has ever actually seen, and so I'm actually a fan whenever she's in the meta, even if she is very gross and obnoxious to play against. I think that there is a good place having her in the meta. Trundle. Base health mana and mana regen rounded. W bonus movement speed decreased. Health, 617 to... Okay, so they're just rounding... Yeah, they're just rounding everything out. Frozen Domain, bonus movement speed, 30 to 50% to 20 to 52%. So that's actually really big. He loses more than Boots Tier 1 now on his initial W cast, and because you don't actually get access to this until the later stages of the game, you're just permanently running around without Boots Tier 1, and then eventually Boots Tier 2 once you end up getting the higher MS values and all that good jazz. So this is really sad. This is actually a very big nerf to Trundle. Again, Trundle is one of those champions that I think has been grossly overperforming in competitive. I think that he is grossly overestimated in terms of the meta and why people find him good and powerful and whatnot. I still think that, in general, he's probably better slated as a support, even though he was primarily being picked inside of the jungle, and I don't think that people were looking at, like, why he was being picked inside of the jungle, rather than just thinking that he was good, when the reality is that most other players, or not players, most other champions were performing very poorly, and the meta was pretty stale when he started coming in. So, obviously, yes, Trundle did get some buffs over the course of a couple of patches and whatnot, but he's another one of those champions that is just grossly overperforming inside of the meta. Varus, base attack damage growth decrease, Q damage ratio decrease. That's kind of big. Okay, well, actually, never mind. It's 0.11 AD, which, I mean, that is something, I get. I mean, well, not really, but so he's losing a pretty pitiful amount of attack damage. Not like he builds Trinity Force or anything like that, so it's not like any modifiers are getting hit. Q piercing arrow, damage ratio 1.1, attack damage 1.65 maximum to 1.0 attack damage 1.5 maximum. This isn't going to prevent Varus from being picked. It is just going to nerf him, and I think this is one of the most careful nerfs that Riot could actually take on Varus, so I do like that. Also, this doesn't really hurt attack speed Varus all that much. Viktor. Q discharge, damage ratio increase, shield ratio increase. Q siphon power, discharge damage ratio 0.55, ability power to 0.6 ability power. Shield ratio 0.15 ability power to 0.24 ability power when empowered. 0.2 ability power, 0.32 ability power when empowered. Yeah, this is really nice, but the problem is that Viktor doesn't have a problem bullying people in the early stages of the game. He can actually go pretty even in the most case, or he can outright just win the laning phase pretty early on because he is still really strong because of his Q and his E, and just his shield in general. It makes it very hard to win trades against him in certain matchups. The other thing is that Viktor is a really good user of just teleport in general. And so combined with like his dueling power and everything else going on for him, that's never really been his problem. Getting a 0.5 AP ratio on him doesn't really make any sense whatsoever, so I don't understand why they think that this is somehow going to be an adjustment that is going to shift him back into the meta. His Chaos Storm or his E needs to deal more damage, not his Q whatsoever. I do like the fact they didn't try to touch the base damage, because if you try to touch the base damage, you are sort of incentivizing Tank Viktor to end up coming back into the game, and so they're keeping it with the ability power. Volibear, gameplay clarity improvements, base mana growth and health growth increase, Q bug fixes and quality of life changes. Okay, so Volibear is a champion that I have talked a lot about, and I clarified a lot of my thoughts on Twitter. I have spammed him so many games. I have lived with players that have spammed him a lot of games. I currently live with a couple of Korean Challenger players. They have tried to play him, and they have managed to lose to people that are 1500 LP lower than them pretty consistently inside of the game when it comes to just having to rely on just basic like lane manipulation and overall game understanding in order to get edges. For a champion that is simple, for a champion that is designed at being cookie cutter and basic, his win rate, now, I often hate citing win rates because I don't think that they tell the whole story. I think that also a champion can actually be very powerful while having a low win rate. Do not think that's the case with Volibear. Volibear has a fundamental core problem in that he has so many different ratios throughout his entire kit that then makes it so that if you commit to trying to benefit any one of those individual ratios due to the way that itemization and runes currently is in League of Legends, you then cripple all other aspects of his gameplay. If you want him to go HP, he's not going to deal damage. If you want him to go attack speed or something, he's not going to deal damage, he's going to be extremely squishy. He has no base stats. Even when he catches up to someone, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be able to achieve anything. If you do end up going damage, or if you go AP or something, well, again, you have the problem that you don't have HP, or you don't have any tankiness, you don't have any durability. So what happens if you end up going AP? Well, if you go AP, you can deal a bit of damage with the burst, and then you completely just flop. You're just completely useless. If you go full tank, you can stick to the target, but then the question is why aren't you Set? Why aren't you Wukong at that point? Why aren't you so many other bruisers that are in the game that are just going to do what Volibear wants to do, but better? When I initially saw the Volibear rework, I actually thought that Riot actually had a pretty good idea of how to shore up some of the previous version Volibear weaknesses. But the ratios and the stats and the way that they made his ratios across the kit, having AP, different attack speed, AD, bonus or max HP, whatever, the healing, the way that the healing works, his mana costs, his cooldowns, everything is just so all over the place. One of the things that I likened it to on Twitter is, if anyone ever played World of Warcraft, when you play Druid, generally when you spec into a specific class, whether you're going to go Feral, you're going to go Boomkin, you're going to go Restro, or something like that, you're going to be pretty good at doing that role, or you're going to be really good, and that's completely fine. The thing with Volibear is that he is trying to sort of do everything. He's trying to do all of the Druid classes, and even if you do spec into one pure Druid class, you get punished for it. So in this really weird thing, he's not even a jack of all trades. He's like a, it's like a 6. Like I'm not even sure what this champion is. So he just feels really bad. They're being extremely reserved with him, and I don't understand, because again, this is a champion that is supposed to be with Garen and Darius and Set and all these other champions in terms of simplicity, and I think that maybe one of the things that is making them hold off on buffs or anything is that they maybe don't want another Set, and Set is obviously, he's becoming much more dominant inside of the support role rather than mid and top, at least in pro play and competitive, and I don't really know. So that was my little explanation there on Volibear. Let's get into the buffs so I can say how much they don't really mean that much. Impact Crater. Volibear's E, Sky Splitter, and R. Impact Craters now disperse faster. Okay, well that's nice. Visual Gameplay Clarity. Improve the visual clarity of several of Volibear's spells, including W, Frenzied Maul, E, Sky Splitter, and R, Stormbringer, okay? Fixed a bug that caused Volibear to hum way too often. Volibear's Eternals are now alive, okay. Base mana stats. So this is actually really big. So this shores up one of the problems that Volibear was having as a champion, and that he needed mana. He wanted mana, which made it really awkward to itemize, because you had to find items that shifted into all of his ratios and what he was trying to achieve in order to get something, while also simultaneously including mana in his kit. So the mana growth going up by 10 per level is really big. This basically gives him an entire rotation for free. However, I'm worried because it seems like Volibear is being shifted into the jungle rather than in any of the lanes, and if that ends up being the case, then the mana growth doesn't actually matter, because if you're sentient, you know how to manage your mana, because it's really not that hard with Volibear inside of the jungle because of how quickly he clears camps and how little reliance he has on his spells in order to do so. Health growth is up by 5 per level. So he gets a little bit of HP. Now this also helps his healing, this helps his other stuff that he ends up going, it ends up helping some of his items if he ends up building it, but it's a pretty pitiful amount of HP. This is ultimately going to be 2 auto attacks or something late game, which is not helping him whatsoever. I mean, I really would have liked to see if they actually just gave him outright a Ruby Crystal, or more than a Ruby Crystal in terms of HP, but that's not going to be the case. Q Thundering Smash. Bear with it. Thundering Smash's empowered attack can no longer be interrupted by crowd control once it's been initiated. That's obviously nice. Attack speed scaling. Thundering Smash's empowered attack now scales its timing with attack speed. That's really nice too. This means that his items are indirectly being buffed, which is also something that's going on here with the mana growth and the health growth. So they're trying to shore up some of his weaknesses. I really like what I'm reading so far. Volibear's Thundering Smash reset will no longer fail if quickly recast after being interrupted. That's really good. Frenzied Maul. Volibear will now automatically attack his target after canceling his Frenzied Maul and E. Sky Splitter animations, okay. Volibear will now continue to attack his target even after casting Frenzied Maul on them, okay. Made larger and better anchored to the target's health bar. Okay, that's good. Stormbringer. Turret disable duration 2 to 6 second scaling to 3, 4, 5 seconds. I think that the end scaling is pretty luxury. I've never seen an instance where Volibear actually like utilized his rank 3R with the intention of bringing down the turret and having his entire team follow up. And even if they were, I don't think that the 1 second is really going to matter. So I like what they're doing here. They're shifting the power to be more early game, which I think is more important for him, especially for diving. Epicenter radius 250 to 300. That will make it easier to hit, but I think that's still kind of small for what you're trying to achieve. It's pretty easy to dodge by most champions that have a dash or anything. Base damage 250 to 700 to 300 to 700. So that's, I mean, that's more damage, but the problem is Volibear doesn't get pen. So when he doesn't get pen, even if he has a lot of high base damages, he has to be getting aid from somewhere else. So that's what's really awkward about just having these high base damages, that he never really gets pen. Attack bug fix. Fixed a bug that caused Volibear to automatically basic attack a target ally. A target. After landing via R, reduce slightly, okay? Model size, turret disable, visual effects, turrets disabled with R, Stormbringer are now much darker to denote their status. Okay, so all of these changes are really, really, really good. I still think that a lot of his problems are not being touched upon. One of the other interesting things that I think I didn't really touch on in the initial rundown of Volibear is that what does his late game really even look like? He can be really tanky, but even when he's being really tanky, is he really threatening things all that often? And I really don't know. I genuinely don't know the answer to that. Also, I think he has really weird itemization, and that people are still trying to figure out what it is exactly that you end up doing. I tried all different variations. I tried pure tank, I tried AP, I tried AP off tank, I tried attack speed with Wit's End and static Guinsu's Rage Blade. I think Guinsu's is nuts on him because it gives him pen and it gives him basically everything that he wants. Gives him AD, gives him AP, gives him attack speed, gives him a double on hit. Like it does so much for him, but it's just so awkward because I don't know if there's a way for him to incorporate that into his kit whatsoever, and so it's just so strange. It's also very weird when you have one core item on Volibear and you can actually lose to champions that have half core item. I think that's another really big problem. Just in terms of like extended trades or how unreliable he is with actually sticking to his opponents. If he does end up being inside of the jungle, well, I guess he's probably a more effective set, at least inside of the jungle role, but do you really want a champion like Volibear on your team inside of the jungle, as opposed to certain other tank junglers that are going to achieve a lot? Because Volibear does have a reliance on getting items in order to actually be oppressive, and even when he gets those items, he's not as oppressive as you would hope for him to be. So I don't really know. I know this was very long-winded. Volibear is something that I was really, really hoping would be a lot better than he is currently, because I love his aesthetics, and I do think that Riot did go the right direction with his kit. I just don't think that the numbers are there yet, and what I mean by that is that obviously his E and his R does make up for some of the weaknesses that the previous Volibear had, even if he doesn't have his flip anymore. Anyways, Xayah, R base damage increased. R Featherstorm, 100 to 200, 125 to 375. This is a lot of damage that she's just getting for free at rank 1 and 2. This is actually very powerful for Xayah in mid-game, who is already, I mean, she's good as a counterpick to certain team compositions, but this is a lot of free steroids. She's also a user of multiple crit items, and the crit items just got buffed last patch, so people have to keep this in mind when thinking about Xayah. She could definitely become a really strong pick, B4, B5, or on red side as a counterpick to the enemy team composition. Yasuo, base health decrease, passive shield increase, W cooldown increase, base stats, 523 to 490, wow. Passive, Way of the Wanderer, 100 to 510 to 115 to 525, so you just have to actually play a little bit more skilled in order to make this nerf really hurt. And Windwall is nerfed by quite a big amount, because you don't actually get points in this until way later, so that's actually going to be pretty painful for Yasuo, and this is unfortunate that the champion is being hit because I think that he is one of the hardest champions in the entire game, and I think that it requires a lot of skill to actually play him and make him work. And I know that there's a lot of the high MMR Yasuo mains on Twitter that have been very vocal about ways to ways to buff him or nerf him. Anyways. Let's get into runes. Approach velocity. Passive. Gain 15% bonus movement speed towards enemy impaired, movement impaired ally, or, wait, what? Gain 15% bonus movement speed toward, movement impaired allies or enemies you've impaired. Gain 7.5% bonus movement speed when moving towards a movement impaired enemy champion. Increase to 15% if you were the one who impaired their movement. There is no longer a maximum range of 10,000 for champions that you have CC'd. Wait, what? What? Wait, did they nerf that? Gain 15% to now gain 7.5, and it goes back to 15%. I don't get it. I thought they were buffing it. Maybe I thought it was 7.5% to, I thought the old one was 7.5%. I thought they were buffing it. Is this not a, I don't, my brain's breaking, I'm just gonna move on. Guardian is a powerful keystone. Okay, so tether range 175 to 350, any damage to 90 to 250. I think this is actually really big. Shield amount 70 to 150 to 80 to 200. I think that's really good. Movement speed 20% no longer gives movement speed. I think this is really fine. I like this buff for Guardian. I don't really have too much to say on it. I think that this is just a really nice, buff for Guardian. Predator, while delivering on excellent finish. Okay, so cooldown 150 to 100 seconds to 100 to 70 seconds. So this is actually really big for Predator users. Damage 60 to 180 plus 0.4 bonus AD plus 0.25 ability power to 30 to 90. So basically the damage has been halved, which is totally fine. You're not using Predator for the damage. You don't really care about the damage when using the Predator. You're using it simply for the luxury of the movement speed and to get into range against the opponent and constantly apply pressure. Active is no longer disabled for the first 150 seconds of the game. That's really big too. I suppose for champions that actually might want to utilize it in the, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I think that actually can be big for certain champions or certain cheeses. Yeah, that would be interesting. Run as fast as you can upon completion. Predator now grants 45%. Oh, no, that's the first two no, actually, never mind. I guess that doesn't actually really do anything. That doesn't really, yeah, I guess that doesn't actually, yeah, okay. Upon completion, Predator now grants 45% bonus movement speed while moving towards enemy champions at a range of 3,000, including enemy champions out of vision. Wow, okay. So you can actually use this as a way to tell if someone's nearby. Channel interruption. Active is no longer interrupted if you can't. Okay. Predator not only deals damage and ends the hunt against enemy champions. That's a very big buff. Duration 15 to 10 seconds just means you have to be a little bit smarter at using it, and you can't activate it until obviously you're much closer and able to get the gap close off. Taste of blood, quality of life cooldown indicator change. That's really good. And flinching and approach velocity of very little approach change and intuitive functionality. The goal is to broaden them so more champions can use them while also making them simpler so each rune is more understandable. Gain 10% slow resist and 10% tenacity for each of the summoner spells on cooldown, stacking up to 20%. Gain 15% slow resist and 15% tenacity whenever you cast a summoner spell. Gain 10% slow resist. Okay. Gain up to 20% more. Okay. I mean, this is fine. I still don't. The problem is that the overgrowth and the is it revitalize? I think that those two runes are just so good on most champions that are taking them, and unflinching is generally it's either a spellbook rune, in which case most champions that are using spellbook don't want to actually go resolve secondary, or it's a jungle rune, and when you're going jungle, if you're using this tree, I think that you're taking unflinching anyway. So I'm not totally sure like what the attempt is here. Summoner spells. Ghost. Ghost has been a non-viable summoner for many champions for a long time now, adding some power that emphasizes its strengths relative to other summoner spells with a sustained mobility effect for those using it. Aggressive. Ghosting the builder. Ghost's movement speed now activates instantly. That's really big. Takedown MS extension. Ghost's increased movement speed duration now extends by 4 to 7 seconds. Levels 1 to 18 when you get a takedown. This is really big for Darius. It's really good for mages in mid lane that would end up taking Ghost, like Viktor or like Cassiopeia. something like that. Movement speed 28 to 45% to 20 to 40%, levels 1 to 18, cooldown 180 seconds to 210 seconds. I think that's totally fine. This could definitely end up causing a resurgence, especially when you factor in Nimbus Cloak. So I think that certain mages could definitely end up using Ghost, and it could make it very hard to actually stick to them. However, Teleport is still one of the best summoners in the entire game, and I think that when you're playing the laning phase correctly, Teleport just nets you too many advantages, and it's so powerful. So the trade-off ends up becoming, will you be a Spellbook user? And if you're going to be Spellbook and then speccing into Sork's secondary with Nimbus Cloak and Transcendence, or Nimbus Cloak and Celerity, what are you going to end up doing there? Because then you have to be like a utility, hyperscaling powerhouse that's going to end up doing it. So I think that in those cases, it's fine. Elemental terrain, none of that really matters. Upcoming skins and changes. Okay, let's recap before we get to the most important part of the patch note rundown. So yet again, there's not a lot of changes, which is really unfortunate for the patron solo queue tier list. However, I do think that Volibear will finally end up being placed on it. I have a pretty good idea, I think. Well, obviously, yeah, I think he'll finally end up being placed on it. And then, I don't know, you know, everyone's trying to win in solo queue. I mean, the real answer is just pick Annie, you know what I'm saying? Any truers or what? Kali, Q damage, this doesn't really matter. It's not going to change this is one of those things where, it's not meaningful enough, I don't imagine, to actually generate a kill inside of, like, laning. Maybe this is, like, a 0.2% win rate buff, or I don't know. Maybe this actually causes her win rate to go down because more people try to pick a Kali and they can't play her. The brand change, I don't think really does anything. Again, it's more for jungle than it is for mid, I think. Cassiopeia change doesn't really do anything. Fiddlesticks doesn't really do anything. Senna change is absolutely massive for competitive and very high MMR. So this one is, I think, very problematic. Trundle change is really big. And just in general, losing those the tier 1 boots, the tier 2 boots so early on and not getting them until way later in the game is very problematic for Trundle. So this might actually be one of the biggest changes of the patch. Varus change doesn't really do a whole bunch, doesn't really attack speed Varus. Viktor change is interesting now that we've seen the Ghost change, but it still doesn't address Viktor's problems in mid and late game whatsoever. It's a pretty pitiful amount of ability power, so it doesn't really do anything there. Ghost is one of the saving graces that he potentially has. Volibear changes are all really good. I think that it does take the cake. I actually think it's Volibear, then Ghost change, and then Trundle, probably, in terms of the changes inside of this patch. We could definitely make an argument for Xayah. I think that Volibear is a champion that, like, if you want to, just pick Darius and just pick Set in most cases, that you're going to end up wanting to pick Volibear, but it's just how it is. Xayah, really, really big, potentially for competitive. In addition to the changes that she got last patch, Yasuo, sad but unfortunate. Guardian approach velocity, not super, doesn't really matter, I think. Or Guardian's nice, approach velocity, taste of blood, unflinching, doesn't really matter. Predator is a very big buff for the Predator users that are wanting to just constantly apply pressure with it and make sure to utilize that effectively. And I guess that's pretty much it. So, not a whole lot of changes again, and honestly, I'm pissed. I really don't like this. I really don't like this. I've voiced this concern so many times over the years. I was seeing Reddit threads that were talking about this too. Things are getting bland. Things are getting very stale. We did not have an MSI patch this year, it seems. So I have no idea what's going on. I'm really depressed with. And the other thing that is depressing is that pro play is also moving very, very slow. When it comes to innovation and growth now, yet again, and so everything sort of just, like, ties in together. It gets very boring to constantly run into the same exact things over and over and see the same problems be present, and nothing really gets added. One of the things I was really looking forward to was the mid-season patch, and it doesn't seem like we're going to actually get it, because historically, mid-season patches, I guess, do add quite a bit of change, and I don't know. Maybe it's time to re-poll the pro players on how they feel about the meta, or, like, if they really like how slow everything is moving, but I don't know. I think that you can't just poll North America. I would imagine that you would have to poll every single region, but I don't know, man. I think you would even have to give them anonymity on the poll or something in order to hopefully get true responses. This is just really sad, I think. I don't know. Does not leave me feeling very, very good. High Noon Senna looks like something out of a Devil May Cry video game. This actually looks like a Devil May Cry character. I have no idea what is going on there. High Noon Aurelia. Again, this all has like Devil May Cry feels to it. I don't totally know why. And then we randomly get like Iron Man somehow and Dr. Manhattan had a child together that is Hextech Nocturne. So I guess that's what's going on down here. It seems like this lady has opened one of the Hextech chests, and inside of it was a genie. And, you know, he says to her, you know, what is it that you truly desire? She says Twitch Prime, if she has even an ounce of intelligence inside of her. And I think that's pretty much it. So even the skins this patch, I think that their animations in game, from what I've seen on like Twitter, are really good. But I think that in general, it's kind of lackluster. That honestly just looks like a new champion. Like, how is that even balanced? Like, what? Bandito Fiddlesticks ended up getting a bit of an upgrade. He looks like Voldo from Soul Calibur. Oh, High Noon Jin ended up getting chromas too. That's actually really cool. That's really cool. The chromas on High Noon Jin. He looks like something out of like Courage the Cowardly Dog. I don't even know. All right, that's it.